At 9 a.m. on Monday, the 18th of August, 1969, Jimi Hendrix took to the stage and played 16 songs on a 600-acre dairy farm in Bethel Woods, upstate New York. He was the last act to close the Woodstock Music and Art Fair, held over 3 days. 400,000 people came to hear 32 bands to play at what ended up being a free concert, as the organisers couldn't stop people coming in. By the time Jimi Hendrix came to play, most had gone home, and only 40,000 people out of the 400,000 heard him play Hey Joe. I would like to suggest there are some similarities to my talk here in Sun City as we reach the end of this conference, and I speak to a select group of delegates who are interested to hear about the circular economy. Bob Stahl earlier suggested that I had physical similarities to Jimi Hendrix, but I think that's probably stretching it a bit too far. Anyway, I'll come back to Jimi and Woodstock a little bit later. As the introduction suggested, I'm a chartered accountant by profession, and therefore I think the phrase is something like a knowledgeable pessimist. I heard that earlier in the week. So I know nothing about supply chain and nothing about circular economy as a result. However, here I am. So we've been going for 25 years. We're based in the UK and advise small and medium-sized businesses in UK, Europe, and in South Africa. As the introduction said, I lived in South Africa between 1982 and 1986, when the world was a very different place here. I've seen many changes. I've come back in the last 30 years, about once a year. The last time I was in Sun City was in 1984, when I heard a relatively unknown singer, Chris Rea. 32 years later, the place has changed a bit. Anyway, it's good to be back. I've always had an interest in the role of business in international development, and this year I graduated from Sussex University with a Master's in Globalization, Business and Development, amazingly with a distinction, not bad for a 61-year-old. My dissertation was on the circular economy and recycling mobile phones, and I did some primary research here in South Africa. And this has now become a theme of my work, less my paid work, but more of my pro bono work, as I've seen the benefits that accrue to business from adopting business models based on the circular economy. And today I want to share with you some of this learning and how South African supply chains might be able to benefit from the circular economy. I will build on the previous presentation, but I think there are some people who weren't here for that one, but it will not be a repetition, I can assure you. My focus will be on primarily on case studies and examples. But before then, what I decided to do when I came to this conference was to do a bit of a survey. Oh no, I know what I'm going to do. I've got to tell you what you already know. That supply chain management is very complicated. So I came across this definition. That looks very complicated to me. I also came across this diagram, which also looks very complicated to me. But I do know, I did an MBA many years ago, and like marketing, supply chain is everything. It encompasses all elements of a business. And whilst it's complicated, I think we need to start to make sense of things like the circular economy. So I did a quick survey over the last couple of days asking this question: what supply chain issues are you currently struggling with? So I asked a number of people here what they thought the answer to this question was, and very helpfully CISPRO provided me with some answers. So I took these pictures from their posters. So clearly there are some issues, some challenges, and the answers that I got from people when I asked, for example, education and skills shortage, understanding the mind of the customer, managing change and maintaining flexibility, collaboration between people with different perspectives from different areas of the business, volatility in exchange rates, sustainability of water and energy supplies, economic pressures resulting in a less strategic and more operational focus, South Africa changing from a manufacturing to a service economy, getting more value out of existing assets. And I hope the examples I give you of the circular economy will give you some encouragement that maybe some of those challenges can be met by thinking in a more circular way. For me, the circular economy is real. And here's an example. You may not be able to see this, but this is a carpet in a doorway. My wife and I were clearing a house out a few months ago. We had someone come to quote on replacing the carpet, which had been only laid a year before. But when you look at what was underneath the carpet and how the carpet and the underlay had stuck, the whole thing would just have to be thrown away. We thought surely there must be a better way to manufacture and lay a carpet so it doesn't just become another oil-based product that would end up in landfill and take decades to break down. In fact, alternatives do already exist. Companies like Deso and Interface have produced products which get over this problem. Deso developed a technique which splits the yarn and other fibres from the carpet backing. The yarn is purified and reduced into new yarn, and the backing is ground and used as material for the construction industry. Similarly, Interface has a mission to achieve zero negative environmental impact of its product by encouraging suppliers to use recycled material. It also produces a range of easy-to-repair carpet tiles. So these are examples of products which are now part of what is known as the circular economy, rather than what we have currently, the linear economy. The problem of scarce resources and waste arises from the way our modern economy currently operates. It is linear in design, it is powered by increasingly expensive fossil fuels, it relies on continual economic growth, and it generates waste which can be hazardous, which is then often disposed of in unsafe environments in developing countries. An alternative approach to this linear economy is an economy which is more circular in design, benefiting society and nature by reusing products and materials to realise their maximum value. What is the circular economy? Now, a lady called Julie Hill, she's chair of the task force that was created in the UK, produced this definition. It hasn't really come from a single school of thinking, but has originated over numerous decades from a number of different frameworks, including biomimicry, industrial ecology, and cradle-to-cradle principles. Since the Industrial Revolution, our economy has been very linear in its operation, which is summarised in 3 words: take, make, and dispose. Take, make, and dispose. Yet there's been a big effort in the last decade to improve the recycling waste from our homes and offices by local councils, and I found this to an extent in Johannesburg when I did some research with an organisation called Pick It Up. However, a lot more value and energy can be retained by adopting circular thinking, such as reuse, resale, and remanufacture. As the previous presenter said, the MacArthur Foundation is one of the leaders of this particular charge, which is building on many years' worth of work by many other thinkers. So Ellen MacArthur defines the circular economy as an industrial system that is restorative or regenerative by intention and design, so it's deliberate. It replaces end-of-life concept with restoration, shifts towards the use of renewable energy, eliminates the use of toxic chemicals, and aims for elimination of waste through the superior design of materials, products, systems, and within this business models. So I've highlighted restorative, regenerative, and design. Design is a key part of this challenge. Ken Webster, who's head of innovation at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, said that the circular economy is one that aims to keep products, components, and materials at their highest utility and value at all times. It's a global economic model that decouples economic growth from the consumption of finite resources. It is led by business for a profit, within the rules of the game decided by an active citizenship in a flourishing democracy. There's a lot of debate around the basis of the circular economy. Haven't got time to go through that now, but this diagram that Ellen MacArthur Foundation show the orange, if that's the colour that you see, that's the linear economy from top to bottom. The idea about the circular economy, to the right, there are technical materials that can be reused, remanufactured, redistributed, recycled into closed loops. And on the other side, the left-hand side, the biological materials, such as biomass, composting, and putting that back into the food system. Now, an example of this is Starbucks, which I found encouraging, being a Starbucks customer. They've approached this with a slightly different perspective. They've worked in Japan with a company called Menicon, and they developed a solution to the problem what to do with their discarded coffee grounds, instead of simply composting them. So Starbucks and Menicon turned them into bean cakes, which when fermented turn into feed for cows that produce higher quality milk. The circle is completed when Starbucks purchased some of that milk from the farmers for use in some of the company's outlets in Japan. I also it struck me in the earlier presentation that I'm not sure if any of you heard of these edible spoons. It's an Indian chap invented these, and they're made out of millet. They're quite hard, and they have a shelf life of about 3 years. But when you finish using them to eat your food, you can eat the spoon. He's been so inundated with orders, he can't any longer meet them, so you can't order them before Christmas. But if you're interested, and there are 3 flavours: vanilla, savoury to eat your curry with, and then sweet. I think it's Bakey's edible spoons. You'll come across a short video. So what are the drivers for change, and what are the benefits that come out of the circular economy? So here are some of the benefits, and let me let you know what challenges we're faced here around the world. We've already seen some in the previous presentation that the amount of waste is increasing around the world. According to the UN, in 2014, the total global electronic waste, and I'll come back to electronic waste in a minute, generated more than 41.8 million metric tons. Per head, waste production varies considerably between countries. So South Africa generates a relatively high volume of electronic waste. In 2014, it produced 6.6 kilograms per person, compared to 4.4 kilograms in China and 1.3 kilograms in India. Yet in contrast, the UK generated 23.5 kilos, and the USA 22 kilos. So there's an awful lot of electronic waste being created. So apart from waste, there's a great depletion of resources. There are a limited number of renewable resources in our planet. They comprise metals, minerals, and other natural resources, which are mined and made into products which aim to make our everyday lives easier. But they're subject to volatility in price. And the supply chain managers, as you know, that volatility isn't a good thing, and volatility in price is not a good thing either. The MacArthur Foundation estimates that since 2000, increases in commodity prices have balanced out all the price declines of the 20th century. Availability of raw materials has also reduced, as virgin resources are being used up. Thirdly, consumer demands for business to be more responsible are coming to the fore. Consumers are asking businesses to manage their supply chains and their conditions underpinning their manufacturing activities, including waste disposal and labour conditions. And fourthly, consumer demands are coming for products that they buy to be more sustainable, to do less harm to the environment and society, similar to the growth of fair trade products on sale in UK supermarkets. So the benefit of the circular economy to business supply chains in that context are here. I'd like to highlight simply that the focus we're going to have in the case studies that I present are partly to do with profit streams, new profit streams. Reverse logistics was mentioned in the previous presentation. On top of business benefits, there are also environmental and society benefits, the triple bottom line perspective. In many developing countries, there's a very high level of informal working. And the circular economy could be one way of increasing the move from informal to formal employment, as well as encouraging entrepreneurs through small repair businesses. Okay, mobile phones. This was my dissertation question. Towards a circular economy in South Africa, what are the constraints to recycling mobile phones? Do you know how much gold there is in a ton of mobile phones? I don't, but it's about the same as a ton of ore, of gold ore, coming out of the ground. And in fact, there's some statistics which suggest even more. So given all these mobile phones that exist around the world and all this waste that's coming out of that, I just wanted to ask you whether these pictures might be familiar to you in your own home or office. So these 2, 4, 6, 7 handsets that I had about 2 months ago, I took a photograph of. They were lying around my house, in addition to chargers, headphones, and other electronic devices. The vast majority, if you think about the gold, however much it is that's sitting in people's drawers around the world, it is a huge amount. We are just not using that value. Now, one way of doing that is to reuse these. So I've started to reuse these, give them away. Or if I can't give them away because they don't work that well, I can give them to somebody to recycle. In fact, I've been very critical over the years of Apple in particular. However, the iPhone that I've got is actually worth about £10. If I take it to Argos, a retail shop, they'll give me £10 for it, and then they'll recycle it. Either by, if it still works, they'll actually repurpose it and sell it on. Now, Apple do have take-back schemes, and they've actually come up with something called, well, I'll let Liam introduce himself. So, meet Liam.
The iPhone is the result of years of innovation. But true innovation means considering what happens to a product at every stage of its life cycle. Meet Liam. When it's time, Liam deconstructs your iPhone. Parts are detected and removed and separated, so the materials inside those parts can be repurposed to rescue cobalt and lithium from the battery, separate the gold and copper in the camera, extract silver and platinum from the main logic board, so the materials in your iPhone can live on. Because in a world with limited resources, some things can't be replaced.
So good on Apple for doing that. Part of the problem are things like free upgrades. We've all had them. In fact, I'm an O2 customer, and it's compelling. The advertising is very appealing. Yet there are some solutions. If we look at the design of a mobile phone, how repairable it is, we know that Apple aren't too good about allowing their phones to be repaired. Other phone manufacturers are the same. The ability to upgrade it, take-back schemes, recycling components, as we just seen, and an intriguing one as product as a service. I'll show you an example of that a little bit later. That instead of owning a mobile phone, how about leasing it, having it as a service? Now, this has been done in the photocopier industry, the car industry for many years. Why can't we adopt a similar model so that you don't actually own it? You might own a washing machine at the moment, but you don't have to. You can actually now lease a washing machine for something like 10,000 cycles. And when you've been through that, they'll come take the washing machine away and give you another one once you sign another contract. And that existing washing machine will be taken away, refurbished and reused to another customer with a similar guarantee to be used for another cycle of washes. In terms of design, Fairphone have designed a modular mobile phone. So this means that it can actually be taken apart. You can upgrade it, the camera, the Wi-Fi. I've yet to be brave enough to take apart my Fairphone, but it's a relatively straightforward thing to do, and they give you some very good guidance how to do it. Now, Accenture have, a chap called Peter Lacey has produced a book here. Now, I'd highly recommend this book. It's called Waste to Wealth, The Circular Advantage. And I'm not sure if you can read these 5 circular business models. But what we're going to do is go through some examples of these business models. So the 5 models that he proposes, the first one is a circular supply chain. Now the examples, this would be fully renewable, recyclable and biodegradable materials that can be used in consecutive life cycles, which can reduce costs and increase predictability and control. Kralar Technologies produce renewable and environmentally friendly biomass resources using flax and hemp that let apparel companies produce a garment that is soft and durable as cotton without the environmental risks. The amount of water that cotton uses to be produced is enormous. Secondly, AkzoNobel, a global paints and coatings company which produces specialty chemicals has partnered with Photonol, a clean tech company, to develop a process for harnessing the power of the sun to make chemicals in a similar way that plants use photosynthesis. So that's the first one. And there are many examples in this book. So these are just a few extracts. Secondly, second business model, recovery and recycling. This would create production and consumption systems in which everything that used to be considered waste can be revived from other uses. Companies either recover end-of-life products to recapture and reuse valuable material, energy and components, or they reclaim waste and byproducts from a production process. So examples of this, Unilever. And as of February 2016, Unilever sends 0 non-hazardous waste to landfills across more than 600 sites in 70 countries. General Motors recycles 90% of its worldwide manufacturing waste and generates $1 billion in revenue annually from byproducts, recycling and reuse. And part of my message today is that actually there's money to be made here. Some very big companies are making some very big amounts of money. $1 billion in revenue from byproduct recycling and reuse is a lot of money for General Motors. So extending the product life. Many products get thrown away by customers when they're broken, they've got out of fashion, or no longer needed. But many of these products still hold considerable value. By maintaining and improving products through repairs, upgrades, remanufacturing or remarketing, companies can keep them economically useful for as long as possible. Caterpillar saves money for itself and its customers, as well as up to 90% energy used by remanufacturing components each year in a profitable operation which employs over 4,000 people. I think they're one of the early adopters of these particular techniques. Dell Computers takes back and resells unused products such as returns. It certifies refurbished products, such as ones coming out from leasing, and those that are scratched or dented, they refurbish those from their blemishes. Sharing platform. Now, you've probably come across examples such as Airbnb, Uber, and Lyft, ride sharing, Deliv, shipping services, sharing, and Peerby, consumer goods sharing. So this sharing platform uses digital technology to create new business opportunities and stronger relationships between customers, companies, and micro-entrepreneurs who rent, share, swap, or lend their idle goods. And finally, product as service. If manufacturers and retailers bore the total cost of ownership of a product, many would focus on longevity, reliability, and reusability. It's a long time since I've darned any of my socks. Consumers would lease or pay based on the amount or frequency of use of the product. This means that performance and durability come to the fore ahead of volume and disposability. Examples are Michelin. It enables fleet customers to lease instead of purchase tyres outright. Selling tyres as a service with customers paying per miles driven. Philips, a very good example, don't sell lights anymore. They sell lighting as a service, charging not for the LED dials themselves, but for their usage. This global market will be worth more than $40 billion by 2020. Now in South Africa, talking to colleagues here, there aren't many examples of circular economy companies. But this hotel in Cape Town is going a long way towards this. The other example is Redisa, that recycles tyres. I'm sure you've heard of them. You may also have heard of some of the not so good press that they've had. Part of the change towards the circular economy relies on the role of government. And I'm not going to go into which countries in Europe have a circular economy strategy, but Europe at the end of last year, the EU circular economy package in December last year, has a very clear strategy and funding to attempt to do something about the problems that Europe is faced with using circular economy as a means to achieving that. South Africa, as far as I'm aware, doesn't have a circular economy strategy. In fact, neither does England. Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland do, but England doesn't. London does. So what's the future? The near future? Well, maybe a circular economy strategic roadmap for South Africa. That might be something. People I talked to in my research thought this might be a good idea. How it's going to happen? Well, it would require companies to be involved, academics, government, so there's idea and business. And to have a collaboration along these lines is really going to be the only way, and that's a thing that's come through a lot of the sessions I've sat in on the conference this year. Perhaps new profit streams. You might be able to identify something within your own companies, perhaps being pressured by consumers for more sustainable products. And then maybe as part of the Sustainable Development Goals, which were published last year, there are some pressures for innovation to come through from there. No, not yet. Earlier this year, I gave a talk to a group of futurists in London entitled From Tipping Site to Tipping Point. And we discussed what might be the pressure, what will make people change, what will make business governance change. Intriguingly, someone suggested civil disobedience and anarchy, which I think perhaps is going a step too far, but maybe pressure from more of us as consumers to help move this forward. And coming back to Jimi Hendrix, part of what happened at Woodstock in 1969, young people were moved to demonstrate their feelings about the Vietnam War and their dissatisfaction with their political leaders. The first man landed on the moon that year, and things were never the same again. So maybe there is something that our young people can think about. Ellen MacArthur are focusing, she says, mine is a lost generation. It's the next generation that's going to be the ones that make the difference. And she's working very closely with a lot of universities. So just to close, this Friday I'm facilitating a workshop in Cape Town, a knowledge exchange on the circular economy between Europe and Africa. So we've got 5 people who know something about the circular economy in Europe. We're going to, on Skype, we're going to be participating with a group of people in Cape Town. So we're going to be considering possible pilot projects in South Africa. So if anybody wants to know more about that, how we might be able to discuss with you possibilities of pilot projects. There's a plenary session after this one, so I will be around if you want to talk to me. And just finally to close, I think the previous speaker and I have both talked about the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, so I thought I'd leave you with Ellen MacArthur just to give you her space. Now, she is English and she speaks very fast, but I think what she says really sums it all up for me. If you can run the video. Thank you.
My background isn't in global economics at all, but it's actually in offshore racing. I used to sail solo non-stop around the world, which was a bit crazy, because when you do that, you take everything you need for your survival for that 3-month journey, and you manage those resources down to the last drop of diesel and the last packet of food. And no experience can ever give you a better understanding of what finite means, because when you're on that boat in the middle of nowhere, what you have with you is all you have. There really is no more. And I'd never translated that understanding of finite that I felt on the boat to anything outside of sailing until I set foot off the boat at the finish line. And I suddenly realised our global economy is no different. It too is dependent on finite resources that we fire through the economy. And since the Industrial Revolution, our speed of use of those resources, which are ultimately finite, has gone up and up and up. A good way to understand the circular economy is to compare it to our current predominantly linear economy, whereby today we take a material out of the ground, we make something out of it, and then ultimately that product that gets made out of it gets thrown away. And we do recycle some of the material from it, but ultimately it's designed for a linear system. Ultimately that product will come to the end of its life. And the circular economy is a fundamentally different economic model. It's taking the entire global economy, looking at it through a different lens and saying, how can we valorize our economy to a higher level? So never at any point would anything made within a circular economy become waste. Everything would be designed so the materials within them can ultimately be valorized, but they can also be kept at their highest utility at all times. A ton of food waste could turn into $6 of heat, $18 of fertilizer and $26 of electricity. Or you could look at timber as being a big piece of wood that's cut down that, yes, you could burn, but you could also build a table out of it. Then you could, at the end of the life of the table, recover that material and turn it into particle board or chipboard, then into particle board, ground down board, and then ultimately at the end of the life of that board, you could then biodegrade it and feed it back into the fertilizer and energy system. One of the things that really struck me on my journey of learning was just looking at basic resource prices. Look at the commodity indexes of the last 100 years. We saw that price come down for a century, and then in just 10 years those raw material price decreases were just wiped out. The problem is those prices have more volatility in them than we've ever seen before in history. And a figure that really struck me was that between January 2011 and January 2012, your average European car manufacturer saw a raw material price increase of 500 million euros. Now that's something they have no control over, and in order to make money, they have to buy new raw materials, they need to make vehicles and sell them. And so much of the strategy around protecting companies from resource volatility was around being efficient. And you talk to chief executives and they'd say, our goal is to be more efficient with the way we make our products. So we use 10% less material, we use 10% less energy every year. That's to make us less exposed to those volatile prices. But actually, if you pan that out 10 years, does that mean that in 10 years you make nothing with nothing and have no employment? That does buy you time, which of course is vital in the transition. But the fascinating fact for me was in the transition to what could actually work. There is often circular activity already in existence within the business. So sometimes the first step is identifying that circularity and then building on that. So for example, with Renault, with whom we've worked now for many years, they already had remanufacturing. They already had this incorporated into much of their design. But when you look at it as a whole systems approach, rather than the design of the cars here or the remanufacturing being something separate, you suddenly end up with a systemic change that can happen through the whole business. The role of the circular economy is not trying to improve what we have at the end of the pipe through a lot of consumer engagement or recovering higher values of materials from what we have in the economy today, but it's going to the beginning of the pipe and it's building a system that can really run in the long term. So it's working with businesses, with regions, with governments, and ultimately at the end with individuals to build a system whereby people have the choice to switch to more circular models. You could ask the question, how would you get people to switch to more circular models? How would you get them to buy more circular products? And I think them understanding what the word circular economy mean are irrelevant. You don't really need them to. If you shift your mobile phone contract from buying the phone and then when you get the next one, you throw the old one away or you resell it into secondary markets. If that contract shifted to being a performance contract where every year you got a brand new phone, but you just happen to send the old one back to the system, what we've seen from the studies is we get a better phone more regularly, and the manufacturer or the service provider knows that phone will go back in, so they can equally valorize it. So it tends to be a win-win situation. Doesn't need to say circular economy anywhere on it. It's just a better value proposition. I think some interesting things to bear in mind if you're looking at shifting your business from linear to more circular. One would be what circular activity already exists within your business. And in most cases we've looked into, that already exists, and how can you build on that and communicate on that throughout the business so people understand the direction of the business. Another question would be, how resilient is your business in a world where we have more price volatility than we've ever seen before in history? And indeed, what is your opinion on how circularity can make you a more resilient business and can isolate you through having those resources, having those products cycling at a higher level within the business? I think systemic change within the business, so bring all the parties on board. This can't just be a question to discuss with the design team, but it's the marketing team, it's the financing team, it's everyone within that business. People just seem to understand that. They understand the reorientation of the business, they understand it delivers more value, and that really helps people to get on board the understanding that this is systemic change, it's not just one department.
So thank you for your participation, and I wish you the best of luck in exploring this further. So do have a chat with me afterwards if you'd like to. Thank you.